Hello and welcome to Focus on Liberia. This is our program, The Hour of Politics, with me, Anthony Sie. Always focus on Liberia, broadcasting from Atlanta, where our headquarters is situated. It is a very special edition of The Hour of Politics. You know, we usually don't come on a Saturday, but the issues are serious. The country is bleeding politically and economically. Socially, it's bleeding. I have a gentleman here who continue to remind me, he said, see, young brother, what the homeboys are doing when they are done with the country, even the tears will not be enough to help our people. George Preston Lobbo is comfortably seated as my guest in this edition of the Hour of Politics. Well, the topic is always interesting here at Focus on Liberia. Our topic for today, the proper government and the Liberian people. They came with this mantra, pro-poor. They said they are for the poor. And the people bought it. And here we are, 4 years and counting. How are we doing? Well, I have a gentleman who's going to provide his perspective here. But to make this all possible for you, audience, we have two segments. Segment number one, the major sectors in Liberia under the proper government. How are we doing with education? How are we doing with health? And the list goes on and on. And finally, this is the lifeline of any country, the budget. It is like an engine of the economy or the country. They say they are proper. The question is the 2022 draft national budget actually proper? Let me bring in my guest quickly and start boring you with this introduction. George, welcome. It's good to have you.
Mr. C, it's a pleasure joining you this morning. I want to say thank you once again for the opportunity to be here. I'm glad to come on to talk about national issues, to focus on Liberia. And our listening audience, I want to say thanks to all of you. But it's a privilege to be here with you this morning.
Thank you so very much, George. It's always good to have you here. I focus on Liberia. If we look at our statistics, you have a peer here more than any other guest. And I know we have this special relationship with you as we try to provide the education for our people in understanding the issues that affect their daily lives. It's good to always have you. Let's get started, George. Why not we start like this? It's been 4 years now since our people celebrated in the streets, under the sun and under the rain, to bring this government to power. How do you think they are doing based on what you see so far? Your general assessment.
You know, Mr. C, I want to say thank you for such a brilliant question this morning. You know, when you take over an organization, the expectation is that what your predecessors didn't do, that you will come and make it better. That is why there's always a need before you inherit an institution or an organization to have an understanding of what the problems are, so that way when you come in, you bring in a team that is ready to work. In my country, Liberia is an unfortunate situation where we elected a government that came to power and spent 6 months in power, yet didn't know what needed to be done, was trying to figure out. So it took them the first 6 months to come up with a plan, which was a 5-year plan called the Proper Agenda. However, this is the only government in modern time in the 21st century that have come to power and spent over 3 months without a 100-day delivery action plan. This is unheard of. But again, Liberians must understand the decisions we make do have consequences. As it relates to my own assessment, Mr. C, you know, when I speak on national issues, they say the numbers don't lie. So I would like to keep the conversation based on where the numbers are. When the CDC government inherited Liberia January 22nd, 2018, Anthony C, the national poverty rate of Liberia was at 50.4%. By the time we got to 2019, the national poverty rate had climbed to 55.5%. So any rational human being, when Maggie go to school and say they are doing exceptionally well, that itself should tell you, what is your definition of well? If you took the national poverty rate from 50.4%, that was going down. We took it from 68.0% to 50.4%. The expectation is that within the past 4 years, we would have seen the national poverty rate on a 45.5%. Instead, right now it's about 55%, almost 56, pushing 60%. So my own assessment in that area is bad. Now let's look at other areas of the government performance in terms of the fight against corruption, in terms of increasing capacity for our people, in terms of providing basic social services. Mr. C, you know what I found troubling about the government is that if you use the government own words and use President Weah's own words, to me it's like it's a man who's telling us one thing, but instead is doing something completely different. So, Mr. C, I will tell you, the Liberian people can speak for themselves because from what I know, given my own visits to Liberia and the constant communication on the ground and looking at the data, Mr. C, Liberia is in a very, very difficult spot. And I can say to you that until, I read the book Animals Farm, and during one of the meetings, they said, the sooner we get rid of men, the better our lives will be. The sooner we can get rid of the CDC. Animals Farm, the animals said, the sooner we get rid of Mr. Jones, the better our life will be. So the sooner we get rid of George Weah and the CDC, the better the Liberian people's life will be. And that is what I would say to that question.
George, thank you for your opening. Let's go to our first segment here quickly. The major sectors in Liberia under the proper government. George, we will have to start with health here. And I want to lay the basis here as I bring you in. Let's start with a news article. And you say as a case study, and this article is about the JFK. I know Phoebe is a hospital you are emotionally connected to, so you can add that to the case study. But let's use this story. Why is this story not loading, people? I just read this story this morning. But let me just explain the story. It's a Daily Observer story talking about JFK, how because of power fluctuation, according to them, water is now flowing to the hospital. And as a result, some employees at the JFK have to be asked to carry water in buckets as a means of supplying the hospital with water. Because of fluctuation in power, according to the story, even the pipeline have issues. The water is now flowing. In other words, George, there's no stable electricity at Liberia's #1 preferred hospital. And we continue to see the administration talking about increasing budgetary allotment to this institution. What is responsible for this, George?
Mr. C, you see, I try to be as realistic as I can be. Mm-hmm. You see, Liberians need to understand something when it has to do with the budget. Allotments in the budget does not mean full disbursement. Mm-hmm. You can allot money or you can appropriate money, but that does not mean you disburse the funds. And the reason why I'm saying this, Mr. C, the very first thing I always like to look at the CDC first budget. When the CDC came to power and they told the Liberian people that they were going to make their life better, we felt that healthcare, education, sanitation, those would be some of the major areas they will focus on. Given the fact that President Weah always talk about his childhood, his early upbringing, that he grew up in some of the slum communities in Liberia. So we felt that a man who grew up in the slums will understand what it means to have his relatives or friends, his friends living in the slums. So improving the healthcare conditions so that those who live in the slum when they get sick can be having access to quality, affordable healthcare will be something of his priority. Unfortunately, Mr. C, what do we see in the proposed budget? We saw major cuts being made to the healthcare sector. Let me just go back to 2018-2019 budget. JFK in the 2017-2018 budget under the Unity Party government was allotted $5.9 million. When the Popo took over, Mr. C, the first thing they did was to get JFK $5.1 million. What happened? Phoebe was at $2.1 million. The Popo decided that $1.9 million would be enough to bring quality to the healthcare sector. Here's the most interesting thing about the whole situation, Mr. C. You allotted money to these hospitals, but it's a pity that less than 50% of their allotments have actually been disbursed to them. So in short, they just saying we gave them this money, but they're not really disbursing the money. So the reason why I say this, I like to always use Phoebe.
And George, if I may, what is stopping the disbursements of this money? What could that something might be responsible? Do you know,
Mr. C, you know, in life, you have to learn to be honest to yourself. Like Coach said in the song,
right?
When you set a budget, which is an estimate of expenditure and income for a set period of time, your ability to generate income must be based on your policy, your programs, and what you're doing as a government to be able to enhance your capacity to generate revenue. And since the inception of this government, Mr. C, you and I know that businesses are staying afloat. There have been no huge foreign direct investments, even though we saw our 21 Arab investors that came to Liberia in the executive mansion meeting with the president. They were on their phone because the president had nothing of substance to provide for them. So, Mr. C, listen, because you project these numbers and you allocate money based on what you're thinking. Many of us in Liberia, we live in this fantasy world where we believe that things will be fine when we go to bed, but in reality, we are still suffering. So the government project these big numbers and make allotments based on what they perceive will happen. In reality, there must be actions taken by government to ensure that they can generate the revenue. So when the issue of disbursement comes in, Mr. C, what we are saying is that the government don't have the capacity. Because you know very well that since the inception of this government have recorded the largest budget shortfall since the settlers arrived on Providence Island. You know that. So Mr. C. Okay. Again, Mr. C. When you make allotments to these areas, right? This is why some of us in the opposition, we are arguing that there is a need to see the budget performance review report, Mr. C, because that will inform us how well the government have been doing. Have we been meeting our revenue target? Have we been fully funding our expenditure? Because, Mr. C, right, if we allotted, let's say we allotted $10 million or $2,000 to focus on Liberia, right, for this dissemination information. But if we get the review report, and the review report say, but in the $2,000, focus on Liberia, only receive $500. Do you think in the next budget we'll allot $4,000 to you again? Will it make sense?
George, it would not make sense, but here is the thing too, though. There is COVID has impacted economies across the world. And most economies have experienced budget shortfall. Liberia is not an exception. And you know very well, George, you and myself follow the numbers, that this government, since it came to power, they have experienced budget shortfall for the most part, even though we continue to hear surplus here and there, which is not, true, and you know that. So given the reality that there has been budget shortfall, could it be responsible for these allotments not reaching the agencies, ministries, or that they've been budgeted for?
Mr. C, when I discuss national issue, I do not discuss national issue based on hypothetical situations. I do not think about what people perceive. We must not use the COVID now as a get out of jail card for the CDC government. Because in reality, Mr. C, I was in Liberia in 2020. What really was happening what really happened in Liberia, for which that really impacted the Liberian economy as it relates to COVID? Because I was in Liberia. COVID, I will tell you, Mr. C, I think COVID was a blessing for the CDC government. Because here's how.
How?
COVID, let me tell you why. Because of COVID, the government have been able to get additional resources from the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, the African Development Bank, and all of the European Union. Not only that, because of COVID, the government is now being able to generate over $4 million from $75 that people pay upon arrival and prior to departure. That is a source of revenue, even though those revenue have not been captured in the budget. So if we look at it from that perspective, right, Mr. C, because of COVID, $17 million was allotted to the health ministry. Do you recall when they did the recasting of the budget during the stimulus, where the government moved $10 million from the Ministry of Health towards the Ministry of Public Works? When we argued that was wrong, what was the justification? That the World Bank and the IMF are going to be sending $17 million to the health care sector. So we took $10 million to Public Works. I hope when I'm wrong, please correct me, because I want to make sure that we stay on the facts, because I don't discuss government issues based on speculation. So again, Mr. C, technically for them, it has been a blessing, because you know what?
But George, hold on. I didn't mean to cut you off here. The money you talk about being raised primarily at the Rabat International Airport for testing 75 that are going in and coming out. Now, you're saying that is revenue. Don't you think that money, they've been using it to help to fight COVID?
Mr. C, I want to be very, very realistic here. I don't have the time to be speculating. Let me say this to you. Mm-hmm. It's so unfortunate that everything the government got in Liberia have been donated to them. Liberia as a country, is the only country is yet to spend $50 to buy vaccine for its own people, but yet can allot $30,000 to each lawmaker to go walk a ball. That is how pathetic the country is. If you are generating $75 from us for testing a point rather $75 prior to departure, my expectation would have been that Liberia would have been ahead of all countries in Africa. What do I mean by that, Mr. C? From the money we generated in the first 6 months, my expectation was that Liberia would have been one of those countries that would have invested $1.5 or $2 million, so that by the time the vaccine comes ready, that we would have been able to have our own vaccine. Our government would have bought at least $2 million worth of vaccine to vaccinate its people. But up to now, what happened? We are still waiting on handouts. We are still begging. But let me say this, Mr. C. The rate at which we are being vaccinated in Africa, right? According to recent studies, it shows that if African countries will continue to be waiting for handouts, it will take us the next 4 years, 8 months to get Liberia fully vaccinated. So the virus that is already mutating, imagine that. The government, even though this budget that has been allotted, what would have seen would have been significant allotments to say, let's make sure we have a population of 4.5 million people, let's say 5 million, but majority of them, some of them live outside. Let's get them vaccinated. So I want to speak on this issue, Mr. C.
Yeah, please.
Let me just say this before you come in. You see the issue of this government and revenue, right? On the issue of the disbursement. Mr. C, I'm speaking of the 2018-2019 budget. Right. 2019, there was no COVID. You allotted 1.9 million to Phoebe, but Phoebe Hospital went 1 week with darkness. 1 week in darkness. The government hospital in Buchanan, the administrator said, and I quote, he said, we have borrowed so much that we are no longer credit worthy. That was not before COVID. That was not during COVID, Mr. C. We are speaking on the 2018-2019 budget. My point here I'm trying to make to the Liberian people is that if in 2018-2019 budget, you allotted money to JFK and Phoebe, but yet they were struggling, they could not receive it. Imagine what happened during the course of COVID. So again, Mr. C, let me say something to you. As part of the IMF recommendation to the government in 2019, the IMF was very clear in their statement. The mission recommended that the budget for fiscal year 2020 be based on realistic estimate. They didn't say based on guessing, because the IMF saw what was done in the 2018-2019 budget. After the revision, they figured out that the numbers you put for in the previous budget was a bunch of bullshit numbers. It didn't make
George,
sense.
If I may throw this in, and George, if I may throw it in, you are aware the government of Liberia is on record, especially talking about the LRA, that they have even been exceeding expectation in raising revenue. What do you say to that?
Mr. C, the LRA reminds me of the father who tells his children that I've gotten a job raise at my job. Your lives will change. But instead, his children say, eat burger weed and walk to school. That is the Liberian context I will put it in. Because let's be honest here. If for real, they were raising record-breaking revenue. Because if you look at the budget, what is the budget, Mr. C? The most generally accepted definition of the budget is an estimate of expenditure and income for a set period of time. So when we say set period of time, what do we need to fund our budget? Isn't that the revenue generated by the government? So again, that's why I'm confused. How can a government be generating?
Just that statement from the LRA confirmed what you just quoted, that when the international partners advised and look, you should set realistic expectation. All right. And so the LRA is telling you, I think we have been setting realistic expectation. That is why we even been exceeding.
So Mr. C.
Yeah.
They didn't say they must set realistic expectation. They said their budget must be realistic.
Yes.
Meaning whatever they think they will raise in terms of revenue
Right.
Whatever they've been forecasting as their revenue they've raised, the World Bank and the IMF were telling them that, Mr. My friend, based on your previous record-breaking revenue, you put a budget together in 2018, 2019. That budget didn't make sense because we didn't see the revenue. So we want your 2020 budget to be based on realistic numbers, factual numbers. Again, Mr. C, this thing is not hard for us to figure out. There are counted development fund allotted in the budget, right? But you've listened to all the lawmakers. You listen to all the superintendents. That since the inception of the CDC government, there is no county that is yet to receive 40% of its allotment. So my question now to you and the Liberian people, how is it that we're recording record-breaking revenue, but teachers are not being paid? Hospitals can't get their money. They are borrowing for fuel. Doctors are not being paid. So what is this argument, Mr. C? For me,
and George,
I think it's a
question. I'm glad you raised that, George, if I may. That is the question for the lawmakers, the UP lawmakers, the ANC lawmakers, the opposition lawmakers. This is a question for them to answer because if the government is saying they are raising record-breaking revenue, and yet the budgetary allocation for agencies, ministries, and even counties are not being realized or received, then there is a question that the lawmakers need to ask. Why are they not asking the question?
Mr. C, again, let me say this to you. I have been a strong believer that there's two things that the white man took to Africa that have been a problem for us. You see religion, and you see slavery. The white man used religion to make his way in Africa. And once our people accepted religion, the next thing that followed was slave trade. And what slave trade have taught African leaders is simple. It is the mentality of the slave masters. You bring them, you feed them when you need them to work for you. African leaders have mastered the craft of slavery. The white man abolished slavery, even though they started it, but the Africans have never abolished slavery. They've modernized it. And why do I say this?
What do you mean?
Let me tell you, Mr. C. The Africans, when they came across the globe, they fed them when they needed them to work. Today, what do African leaders do?
Are you accusing the lawmakers of practicing some form of slavery, John?
Let me say this, Mr. C. African leaders across the continent, that's what we've been doing. How are they doing
it?
Let me tell you how.
Because these lawmakers, they have been celebrated by their constituents, George. You know that.
Let me say this, Mr. C. When you keep a man stagnated, when you hold a man captive, the country belongs to all Liberians. When the resources are not equitably distributed so that we can advance our people, we can develop their minds. No, we cannot get rid of these lawmakers because you know what? Our people are not educated enough to know what should be expected of a policy maker or of a public official. In the absence of that, Mr. C, we'll continue to have this crack in governance. And this is why you see African leaders do not invest in education, because they know if you educate a society to the point where everybody knows the fact, you think some of these people will be elected? Look, let me tell you, Anthony, I strongly believe that some lawmakers that are at Capitol Building, they should only come to Capitol Building to be petitioning the real lawmakers. But in the absence of educating and developing the minds of our people, these folks are being celebrated as God. How is it, Mr. C, that a man who keeps you in poverty, that a man who votes for a legislation against your interest, that he is celebrated? That is not normal. It's because you don't know.
Okay.
And we can't blame them. We have done very little to make them to know. And this is why some of us have always argued that in the absence of developing the minds of our people, this is why when I say the slave mentality, when they need our people to vote for them, what happened? That's when they want our people to change their clothes. They bring new t-shirts for them. That is when they want our people to be strong. They bring food for them. When they want the slaves to work, that's when they feed them. That is the slave mentality I'm talking about. But instead of developing their minds, they won't do that.
George, let us throw some numbers out there.
Go for it.
With the sectors. We are looking at the sectors under the proper government. I will read some numbers for you, and then I will bring you in. Our emphasis mainly will be on education. We just dealt with healthcare a little more. So this is the agriculture sector. This is, I think it's budget code 09. Agriculture sector in 2021 the government of Liberia from its own revenue appropriated 2 million. All right. And then in the 2022 budget, the government has set aside 8 million. So if you look at it technically, somebody might say, well, this might be more than a 50% increase. Now let's come to another sector, the infrastructure and services sector. In 2021, the government allotted around $25 million. Now in the 2022 budget, the government has set aside 69 million. If you look at it, somebody might think, well, this is more than a 50% increase. Now, if you come to the energy and environment sector,
can we look at the first two, then we'll go down to this. I want to speak on the first two first.
All right, yeah. So let's look at agriculture from 2 million to 8 million, and then infrastructures and services sector for 25 million to 69 million. That is an increase. Does the CDC government deserve some credit here for the allocation?
Again, Mr. C, I repeat, the facts are available to all of us. Mm-hmm. There's a reason why the CDC government have refused to submit a budget performance review report. They know why. Because with a budget performance review report, that will inform us that the first $2 million that was allocated to the Ministry of Agriculture, mm-hmm. that $2 million was actually being disbursed. We don't know that. So again, allocating or appropriating, that one thing. What was actually disbursed? We need to pay attention to those numbers. Because Mr. C, let me give you one number that you left.
And how do we get to know?
We can know because the government refused to do its job. That is the frustrating part about the situation. This is why the IMF saying that. The IMF said to them that, gentlemen, let your budget be realistic. Because the IMF was simply saying, you can appropriate 1.9 million to Phoebe Hospital, but yet then people die because of no electricity. Phoebe is struggling, but you said you gave them $1.9 million. You can't give JFK $5.1 million, but nurses were not being paid. The place is dirty. So again, Mr. C, let me give you a number since infrastructure is here. In 2018-2019 budget, $29 million was allocated for roads. Guess how much was actually spent? $12.5 million. So for me, again, so let's see.
And like you said, the budget is a projection. Apparently, they could not raise all the money, George. So
Mr. C,
budget support could be responsible.
So again, the mm-hmm. reason why we asked for the budget performance review report, mm-hmm. that will inform us and say, gentlemen, we projected that we're going to raise money and give public work 25 million for roads, but mm-hmm. instead we're only able to give 12 million. So next year budget, you know what? We'll set a realistic budget of $14 to $15 million because mm-hmm. we have the capacity to raise $12 million as revenue. That is being realistic. That is what the IMF told them to do. Mm-hmm. So you know you could only raise 12 million. Why come back again and say, I'm giving you 30 million? Is it just for the show? So again, Mr. C, let's look at infrastructure. Let me speak on the agriculture sector, right?
Yes.
The agriculture sector. Many of us who have argued that the way in which we can advance and improve our economy is going to be looking heavily into the agriculture sector, meaning by diversifying our economy. We believe that agriculture gives us the best opportunity to create more jobs, especially low-skilled jobs in Liberia. Mm-hmm. Agriculture could also help Liberia in terms of food security, self-sufficiency on its own. So we have always argued that government must invest heavily in agriculture. Now, another thing we're forgetting to do is this. Appropriating or increasing from 2 million to 8 million. We need to look at what the 8 million is actually going towards. Is 6 million of that 8 million going towards opening new farms? Is 6 million of that 8 million going towards investing in existing agriculture programs that will create more jobs, will increase Liberia food productivity? So, Mr. C, if you increase in agriculture because you want the Minister of Agriculture to buy more Louis Vuitton bags, increase our traveling allowances, and buy new cars, that does not cut it. When we speak of realistic budget, that is what realistic means.
George, I understand the realistic aspect of it, right? But here's the thing too, though. The lawmakers come in the picture. So this is a major allotment. I mean, if I don't know if I can put it that way, from 2 million to talking about or $8 million. The lawmakers, there's a committee on agriculture. Is that committee going to demand the budget performance review of the report that you talk about that will show off whether or not the amount budgeted was received, all right, or realized, and that it was also spent? That's the work of the lawmaker. For the CDC government, somebody might argue that it has done its part, all right? So then here's the question now. You are holding the CDC government accountable for not providing budget or performance report. Was that something that was current or made available on the UP?
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely, Mr. C. That was one thing that I gave the Unity Party government credit for, because what that did for them doing that, what it did was it allowed the government. Think about it, Mr. C.
Okay.
You could not have had a budget of $500 million. Even when we were struggling, the economy grew by. When we left power, the economy grew by more than 2%. Even after Ebola, prior to Ebola, the UP government, the economy was growing way above 6%. Mr. C, let me say this to you, because what that document will do for you, right? It will read this current budget. Go to the appendix. It tells you in this current budget that there was no information as to spending in all those different sectors. It's in the budget. The proposed budget is there. That there was no information given on how the previous spending year was done. So to me, Mr. C, I want the Liberian people to begin to ask themselves questions. Now, we've been allotting money to JFK and these other places. How is it that JFK today, people are hauling water to go flush toilet if JFK was actually receiving the money? Because you know what I would have done? There's a reason why you see the CDC government are firing people, holding people accountable. And let me tell you why, Mr. C. When you put resources into a sector, right, and you expect deliverables, right? If you put the resources there and you're not getting the outcome of your resources, or you're not getting the value of your dollars, then now that means there's incompetent leadership at the area. So now you as an administrator will hold them accountable, replace them, fire them. But the government knows that she can't do nothing, because in reality, they're not giving the poor money. Mr. C, we've had the Minister of Health who appeared before the Liberian legislature and said there were no drugs in the country. We've heard from the Minister of Finance, who the other day doing a discussion at the Taisha, who said that he needs $12 million to buy drugs, other medical supply for the country. But he said they were only able to allot $4 million. Mr. C, how can you need 12 and you allot 4? How many people will really get those supplies? And even that 4, did you actually spend the $4 million? This is why, the reason why I tell you, Mr. C, I don't depend on our legislature, which of course I take responsibility, because I have UP lawmakers there as well, and I'm disappointed in them. I've been very clear on the record on that. But I'll say this again. You see, politicians, you can't persecute them in the court of law. You persecute a politician in the court of public opinion. The Liberian people must understand. If you have a lawmaker there, like I'm going to be calling on Deron and the other lawmakers. You were recently elected in 2020 for 9 years. I don't think this 1 year budget, if you reject it, if you vote against it, it will hurt you. You will not lose your seat. So please, this budget in its current form, I'm calling on them to do the right thing for once. This budget should not pass. If it passes, it should pass without your support. Let you be on the record for the very first time that you saw a budget that was against the interests of our people, and you said, you know what, I can't vote for it. Please, it is not a crime to abstain. I'm begging you. But in as much as I'm begging, I have confidence in our lawmaker. This budget is going to pass, Anthony C.
Josh, and that was what I was going to say. This is not your first time.
I spoke to
this is not your first time making this plea.
I spoke to key officials in the legislature last night, and they made it clear to me.
So, Josh, let me put a few other sectors because of time. Let's put them together, and then you can
go for it
here. So let's look at the energy and environment sector. Now, in the 2021 budget, they have 15 million. 2022, now they have 33 million. Now, if you look at it, that is more than a 50% increase. let's look at accountability and transparency, or transparency and accountability sector. In 2021, they had 10 million. Now, 2022, what is projected is 47 million naira. Again, that is almost 60% increase right there. Then look at security sector and the rule of law. 2021, they have 44 million. Now we are talking about 2022, they have $100 million allotted. George, if we look at it, this is almost like 55% increase. Now let's come to the public administration sector. In 2021, it was 143 million. 2022, it almost doubled, George. You see that? That's 291 million. So let's look at healthcare, which is a sector that you care about and I care about more. The health sector. In 2021, the Propo government budgeted $40 million. In 2022, the Propo government has budgeted $83 million. That is almost like 53% increase if you look at it. Education, which we're about to spend more time on. All right. The education sector. In 2021, the Propo budgeted 40 million. 2022, 87 million. That is almost, Josh, like a 55% increase. So looking at all these numbers and also looking at the fact that the Propo government is saying, I listened to Samuel Twe, he said Liberia is about to experience a transformative growth. I'm paraphrasing here. Given the budget that we have in the tune of $700 million, something that we have not experienced before. Why is it impossible looking at these numbers, Josh? These are big numbers.
So the very first thing, Mr. C, we know that $145 million of the $750 some million is going to come from loan, right?
Right.
So if we took that out of it, this is where I know the government is not a serious government. This is the only government that sees loan as a source of revenue. It's like a man who's borrowing money to take his girlfriend to the most expensive restaurant. That is what the government is trying to exhibit. But let me say this to you. Let's look at the sector, the security sector, for example. Again, Mr. C, there's a reason why we need to look at the fine prints. There's a reason why we need to begin to look at the line items. Because I will say this to you. If you increase any sector by more than 50%, and in actuality, the increment is only going towards overhead costs, that is not going to do anything. For example,
what is overhead costs?
When I say overhead costs, administrative overhead costs. Let's say, for example, you gave the Ministry of Agriculture $8 million, but $6 million is going to go towards compensation, leaving $2 million. What can $2 million do in the agriculture sector? How many programs can you run with $2 million?
So with this security, if I may interject, George, the police is also there. We see the police uniform. It is an embarrassment and shame for our country. Are you trying to say, despite this more than 50% increase in this allotment, the police not going to get a new uniform?
Mr. C, again, I want to be I want to be realistic when I speak on these issues. You know, let's look at the past. We've been allotting money to the police in the last 3 fiscal budgets.
Right.
How much have actually been disbursed to the police? Every time you listen to the police director, he tells you, this is where I find it difficult. The LRA boss will be on air saying we are recording record-breaking revenue. Minister Twe say we are doing so well. The economy is doing so well. Then the police director will say, because of scarce resources, we don't have the need. So again, Mr. C, I'm completely confused when it comes to this government.
So, George, let me pull it this way. I like the answer you give me. Let me pull it this way, George. What can be done with this money? Looking at the need, all right, that we see in the security sector. Let's use the police for example. Now you have budgeted 100 million compared to 44 million in 2021.
All that money now.
What should we expect to see if, let's say, the government is well intentional? What should we expect to see with this allocation?
The very first thing, Mr. C, you have to break that money down. All is not going to the police.
I agree.
They want the vast majority of that money going to NSA and the EPS. There's a reason why it is structured that way. The very first thing this current budget Liberians need to pay attention to. This budget is the budget that is called make or break it for you. Here's why. The CDC is not sure. I speak to people within their party. And I will say this, Mr. C, for the sake of this conversation. After 2023, there will be a new party which will come out of the CDC, which I know. Now, the reason is simple. They don't believe they will win election. Hardcore sedition don't believe they will win election. So this budget is a reflection of what their fears are. This is a budget that is supposed to give everybody now the opportunity that you've not made it for the last 3 years to make it now. The reason why they say make it now, they know that in 2023, investors will be, because during elections normally, in a fragile country like Liberia, investors will be scared to invest because they're not sure what will happen with the election and things like that. Even you yourself, you're in Liberia, you have money, you're not going to be spending money like that. You'll be holding onto your resources. So what these guys have done was to craft a budget, one that will pay them so that when they don't win the election, they are good for themselves. That is all it's about. This is why when you take a look at this budget, majority of the significant increase in the budget is rewarding them at the top. It's not going towards development. Now, take for instance, Mr. C, why will you give security $100 million with an increase of over 50% if you believe that we have major infrastructure deficit? Don't you think you would have seen the largest increment made in the education, healthcare sector to renovate our hospitals, building new hospitals, new community centers, renovating all the schools? You've seen the University of Liberia campus. You know what it looks like. You see the condition under which our brothers and sisters go to class. But again, Mr. C, few things you all need to pay attention to. The NSA is one agency in the Republic of Liberia you can never audit. So it is a very good place to pass money through for any government. You can't audit the EPS people. So again, I want you to look at that budget carefully and see how much is actually going to NSA, the police, and the EPS.
So this 50% plus increase amounting to $100 million. First, you are raising question whether or not that would be raised. And then the second concern that is, hey, this is money that will not impact the security personnel in providing security for our country.
Mr. C, Civil Servant wages. I want to let me give credit to these guys. The guys at CIPA.
Yeah, CIPA. I read that report too.
Yeah, the guys at CIPA did for me, I want to read something. I quick to. The guys from CIPA did a brilliant analysis of the budget, and they sent it to me. And one of them said, "My man Lobbo, you will be able to break it down for our folks." Let me say this, Mr. C. Now, if you want to talk about it will impact the police, right? There's high inflation in the country. Price of basic commodities are up, right?
Yeah.
It would have impacted civil servants if we are seeing increment in their compensation or their wages.
Okay.
The budget you're seeing, is there increment in civil servant salaries? No. If we look at basic salaries for civil service, it decreased by 3%. But what happened? Basic salary for elected officials increased by 9%.
By 9%, yeah, I read that.
So it is for the top dogs at the top. So the government with over 70,000 employees, which is the largest employer in the country, the vast majority of the people are at the bottom. Now, in Liberia, where the trickle-down effect of the economy, those other people that get paid and go home and take care of other people and help other people here and there, if those at the bottom are struggling, and now you've decreased their earning by minus 3%, how does that benefit the country? So it's only the few guys at the top, Mr. C.
But George, technically, right? If you look at that decrease you're talking about, it's not a decrease. It's the main fact that those at the top have gotten a bump, right? So their bump has doubled. That is why it is more like saying those at the bottom, they had a decrease, but technically it's not a decrease.
Mr. C, let me say this to you. Let me say this. If you were at the top, you were always at the top.
Right.
It makes no sense to keep adding you at the top.
I agree with that.
So, I mean, let's be honest. You were making $5,000. This man making $200. Right. If you're making $700 and he's going to make $200, but you must understand, at the time he was making $200 before, he was buying a gallon of gas for $350. Today he's buying a gallon of gas for $650. You who buying the gas for $650 now, you've got $2,000 increment. How is that helping him? This is why more Liberians now live in poverty than 3-4 years ago. And Mr. C, I want you to understand a few things. Again, I will come back to what is important. We must see the budget performance review report. Mr. C, we can make all these analyses.
Is this by law?
Yes. The Ministry of Finance, in the Public Financial Management Act, is required to present to the legislature a budget performance review report. For example, Mr. C, when the government did the recasting of the budget, it should have been there, because the reason why you submit a budget or performance review report, it helps inform lawmakers that, oh, our revenue have increased, so maybe we need to allot more to this sector. Or our revenue have decreased, we need to readjust our expenditure. That is why that information is important. Because, Mr. C, how can we know that the healthcare sector needs more money without that?
Or receive the money that it was allotted for?
Yeah.
Or to know whether or not the money,
even if it was actually being dispersed.
Right.
So how are we making this discussion? And this is why the IMF said that your budget needs to be realistic. The reason the budget is not realistic is because we have no knowledge of how well they're performing. We have no information. When was the last time you've seen that report? Do you know?
And George, whose responsibility it is to demand that report?
The Ministry of Finance.
No, I know it's the finance ministry's responsibility to provide that report, or to make that report, to inform the lawmakers, to inform the Liberian people how they are doing with the budget that they have crafted, right? Yeah. So whose responsibility it is to ensure that this report, first of all, make available, and also that, and what is stopping that?
Mr. C, again, I say this to you. Until we educate our people to elect the right people to go to the Congress to represent them, it now justifies material of the slave mentality. Keep the people in bondage, keep them in captivity, do not develop their mind, do not educate them so that they can make rational judgment. Mr. C, I will tell you, some people who are lawmakers today, if 60% of the Liberian population could read and write and understand, some of these folks will not even be community leaders.
George, let me bring your attention to the situation at the University of Liberia. Let's use it as a case study for the educational sector.
Great piece.
I know that in 2021, there was 40 million. And now in 2022, the Propo government has budgeted 87 million. And we also know that in this 2022 budget, there's 18 million, right?
For the UL.
For the UL, that's okay. 18 million that's been allotted. Now, in addition to that, what we also see is the Minister of Presidential Affairs. He's all over the country with this scholarship program. And let me bring this video to you and our audience. And I want you to take those three pieces.
Go for it.
Put your perspective on it. Let's watch the Minister of Presidential Affairs as he enters Grand Bassa County to provide scholarship program for high school students. So guys, as you can see, that is the convoy of Italian Brigade entering Grand Bassa County. His visit here is to launch a scholarship program, I believe, for students in first grade all the way to fourth grade around that area. So, and you see motorbike, the red barrel you see there, those are members of the party, all in red barrel.
And if you look at the price of gas behind you, it's
right. So, George, we will leave it like that. We're talking education. This is LU. They are crying. The faculty spoke yesterday. We heard them. They are saying they reached a memorandum of understanding with the Ministry of Finance that Mr. Samuel Twer is the signatory to that memorandum of understanding on behalf of the Liberian government. There were 21 items that they agreed to, and the Liberian government is yet to live up to that memorandum of understanding. So they laid down their chalk, and these students are out of school. Now they decided that it's their right to protest, to demand to be in class. But then police was unleashed. Let's look at education. The proper government provided free tuition free across the country, universities and colleges. Have they done well?
Mr. C, from a public policy perspective, I've always been very clear on the records. When you make policy decision, it is advisable that you look 5 generations backwards and 5 generations forward. Because laws that are meant to improve the country or the condition of the people cannot be laws that just to accommodate few people when they're happy. And the thing about the CDC government, this is the only government in the world that I know that have adopted a policy called a talk and do policy. That itself is scary. There's nowhere in the world you call something talk and do. For a country that have lost two generations to emptiness, not doing anything from 1980 up to 2020. So when you take over that type of country, you need a real agenda, a real plan for how you intend to improve the educational sector. How do you intend to give skills to the people? How do you intend to develop the minds of those young people? Some of these young people, you have to understand, Mr. C, they've never sat in classrooms before. For them, they don't think going back to classroom is something they want to do. So again, you have to be able to design programs and say, okay, how can we make this citizen productive without going to the classroom? Can he be a mechanic? Can he work for GSA at a government shop? Can this man be a masonry? Can he be a road maintenance worker and he can work for the Ministry of Public Works? You need to be able to craft policies, programs. But again, President, after our money went missing, they were trying to distract the Liberian people's attention. As a way to get the UL student off their bike, decided to pronounce free public universities. For a government that was struggling already from a budget perspective. And now you take on excess liability that you can't hold. Mr. C, let's use the words of the president of the university upon appearing before the Liberian Senate. The president of the university said, and I quote, the president said that since the pronouncement of the free public university by the government, the president said that all public schools, all public universities and colleges have been running at a deficit. So what does that tell you, Mr. C? That there's not enough money. We've heard from the teachers, right? Why they lay down their chalks. They've not been paid. The government have been lying to them. And again, Mr. C, it brings me back to my initial argument here. That if we are really recording record-breaking revenue and the budget is really performing as we are insinuating, then, Mr. C, why should we have people crying that they're not being paid? Because, Mr. C, if you are allotted in the 2018-2019 budget, Mr. C, the UL was allotted $16.5 million, right? What we are yet to see is how much of this money was actually being disbursed, right? So, Mr. C, for those young people that I saw in the video, I've come to the point where you can blame them all you want. But again, it just solidified my argument on the slave mentality. If some of these young people have skills to do different things, they know how many of their friends are dying from motorbike accidents. But again, they are trying to fill the void. They have nothing to do. So they do these things as a means of survival. In the absence of opportunities, Mr. C, you heard the heartbreaking stories that are coming out of the UAE. I was reading day before yesterday about African migrants that are struggling in the streets around Europe. Young men are dying at the shores of Lampedusa, trying to cross the Mediterranean to enter into Europe, where they are promised no better future. So again, Mr. C, you can't blame those young people. What they know now is to be able to hustle for themselves. Governments all across the continent are doing very little to invest in them, are doing very little to improve their mind. This is why I have argued. You know, Mr. C, this morning I saw a post that I wrote in 2019. And as a result of that, I saved that post this morning because it took my mind back. And what I said in that post was very simple. I said, Mr. C, that the only way forward now is for us to invest in education. Yeah. As you can see, I wrote this post December 4th, 2019. Listen to what I said. I said the only way forward for us as a country, it is to educate and train a skilled workforce. Everything else is a joke.
And so that's why Mangel, I think it was in Bon County some time ago. And some time ago, I know it was say Nimba. I'm not sure of that, but I know
he was in
Nimba.
Bon County where he raised funds. Yeah, in Bon County.
And he went with the vice president.
Margibi and now
Grandbassa. So I mean that is education, right? Free tuition.
Mr. C, let me say this to you. When the government that is responsible to invest in the educational sector, right, refuses to do it, now what Mageddon doing is this. They understand that this is campaign season for them. This is a make and break year for them. So what the guys are doing is, why you think they will allot 500,000 special projects to the president? Why you think they will get at least $12 million for projects? You listen to President Weah said the PPCC slow him down. Why did he say that? Because he knows that the PPCC was an institution we created to be able to create a competitive bidding system. These guys have no intention to be transparent. So what they're doing now is that, listen, before Magay became government official in the CDC, how many scholarships Magay provided before you know of?
I know of 0.
So, okay. So now he's using government money and now he has the ability to get scholarship, right? Is that what you're telling us?
He's working. Maybe he's earning a lot of money.
Look, Mr. C, we need to be realistic here. So let me say this. Do you know that the Ministry of State for Presidential Affairs in this projected budget is going to be receiving more than $18 million?
$20 million has been allotted. And talking about the ministry, let me read some numbers to you.
More than 18.
let me read some numbers to you, George. These are for the Ministry of Presidential Affairs. Domestic travel daily subsistence allowance in 2021 was 32. 2022 is what? 1,800,000.
So think about it, 1 million plus.
George, wait, I want you to cry for your people.
I don't want to cry. I can't cry.
Fuel and lubricants. All right.
Yeah.
Fuel and lubricant. Yeah, are the numbers. You see that? Then fuel and lubricant again, a generator. Yeah, are the numbers. George, these boys are not playing.
So, Mr. C, so they make all these allotments to themselves. And let me tell you what is going to happen. The reason why I'm asking for budget performance review report, right? You know that in the budget, if they don't raise all the revenue, you know that certain agencies take priority over certain agencies, right?
Right.
You know that the Ministry of State will get all their money, right? Do you really think that Zogui Vocational School will get its money when Magida don't have their money? Yeah? So you have to, this is why, Mr. C, I want to see the budget performance review report. Because that will tell us, say, okay, if you allotted 10 million to this ministry, how much they actually receive? How much President Weah, the Ministry of State, received? Because the office of the president is also included in the Ministry of State for Presidential Affairs budget. So we want to see how much they receive. We want to see how much the legislature receive. Again, Mr. C, this is why Magay now have the ability to go around to provide these scholarships. Because you're just saying, if they increase daily subsistence allowances by more than $1 million, how much does it cost to pay 10,000 Liberian school fee? These are government schools we're talking about, not even in private school, Mr. C. Government schools by this time that we thought that giving President Weah history, we should be moving towards where government schools will be investing in it heavily. It should be free for the public if we really wanted to educate the society. Magay, don't be giving scholarship What Mageda should be doing is to invest that money into those schools to make it better, make it free for all Liberians. So why should Liberians celebrate you for taking their own money instead of putting it to... Listen, Mr. C, there's something you left out. Why it is true education got $87 million? Do you know how much is in that money for the hiring of new teachers?
No.
$4 million. Do you know how much is being provided in the Ministry of Education budget for operation funds? $0.00. So that means nobody in the Ministry of Education will be able to go inspect any government school.
So Josh, you see on the screen, Presidential Affairs for Printing, Binding, and Publication Services.
From 60,000 to 233,000. Again, this is the last year of the chopping. So and this budget, that's what this budget
look at this one, Josh. Budget line stationary. Can you imagine that?
75,000 to 508,000.
Yeah.
So what does that tell you, Mr. C? This budget is not a realistic budget. This budget is intended to give the guys their last cut. So that way...
Joe, look at it. How you jump from 75,000?
Ali, if they have gone to 100,000, Mr. C.
And then you went to 500.
Yeah, but this is the budget that Samuel Tuer is talking about that is going to better. How does this better the Liberian people's life? Is this going to better Liberian people's life, Mr. C?
So this is a pro-poor government, right? Let me jump in here a little bit. This is a pro-poor government. So as a pro-poor government in 2021, you managed to use 75,000 for stationary. You survived. You didn't die a natural death. So saying you are for the poor, why you can't use this 75,000 as you managed in 2021 and the excess that you are adding in 2022 and put it to something like education and somewhere else? Why not do that?
Let me differ with you. Because the very first thing in 2021, President Weah sat home for more than 6 months. He didn't go to work. He was a non-essential staff because of COVID. So I believe they didn't even use those stationaries. They should have excess there now because nothing was done in 2020. That didn't go to work. So Mr. C, he didn't work. So he should have left over to his office, right? So what's the need to add more? He's not even adding it by 25%, Mr. C. Think about it. Let me read something to you before the start, because all the time you read it from my mouth. This is the people pro-poor agenda. Now, let me read what he said. He said, we cannot develop Liberia without good quality infrastructure and skillful labor force. Therefore, over the next 5 years, my government will invest in high-quality infrastructures, including roads, affordable energy, air and seaports, telecommunication, housing, water, and sanitation. More importantly, we will invest in our people, particularly into their education, health, and ending widespread vulnerability. Then he went on to say, our government inherited a difficult fiscal situation, and the only way forward is to cut and rationalize expenditure in the short term while growing revenue base in the long term. Mr. C, this is how they are cutting. Stationary from 75,000 to 508,000. That is the definition of pro-poor. So again, Mr. C, it brings me back to my previous comment. This budget is a reflection of the end time. This budget is a demonstration of a group of guys who understand that time is against them. Their lives have caught up with them, and this is the last opportunity to chop. And therefore, the budget does reflect exactly what I'm saying. That's what this budget is about, nothing else.
And George will be going to our comments and then call on so that the viewers can answer some questions too.
I have to say based on the delay.
And then so your lawmakers in the budget in 2021 for their cars was $0. 2022 budget that we're talking about now, they have $3 million there for their cars. And you think that is not enough, right? In 2023, they put some money there, 12 put some money, or President Weah, or the CDC put some money there again for lawmakers, $2 million. So if you are going to buy them cars in 2022. Why are you buying them cars again in 2023? George, Samuel Twer and Samara Wolokoli are making the argument that, well, since we came to power over 3 years now, they have not made any allocation for the lawmakers to buy vehicles. I'm like, okay, so what? Is that even true in the first place, Josh? And looking at these numbers,
I therefore it's not true, because if it was true, then Darius DeLong would not have a car.
right? And then every other person who got elected,
so that
that's
means
about the same time Darius DeLong and
Mr. Sear, how would they say such a thing when the government was able to give 6,500 as operation funds? The very government was able to give the lawmakers 6 months' salary in advance. Now let's break it down. We heard the allegations of the 20,000 that was given to lawmakers. Mr. C, not only that, there was no money there, but the government was able to appropriate 30,000. In actuality, it's 32,000 each for lawmakers for what's it called? Legislative engagement / accessibility. How is it in the world, the community you come from, you don't know the place you live? How you campaign? How is it the place you can go to bed? You need to assess it again. Again, Mr. C, I will say this to you. I don't blame our lawmakers. I have faith in our legislature. I trust them. And when this budget passed, if Liberians don't come together and award Liberian lawmakers for being the most heartless group of legislatures on the planet, I don't think we'll ever give those guys a certificate. But I'll say this to you. Look, let me tell you, 2023, here's my thing. Every Babylon will fry in its own oil. Come 2023, I will be supporting, and I am going to campaign for Joseph Numa Boakai. But the NAUP lawmaker who is expecting George Lobbo, if the Unity Party bring you on their ticket to campaign for you, when I'm going to go campaign for you, you're going to have to agree that I will tell the Liberian people all the votes you've taken in the legislature. You're going to have to agree with me. I have to tell the people all the allotments you've received against them. If you don't want it, don't ask me to support you, because I'm not going to say you didn't get it. When our money went missing, you collected 10,000. You collected your 30,000 in the midst of hardship and suffering on our people. So, Mr. C, this is the most heartless thing that can happen to a country. You know, this morning I was reading on Dubai as people celebrate their 50th anniversary. And people say in 50 years, they turned the country around. Mr. C, you can have money, but if you don't have people with the brain to manage the money, we saw it with the prodigal son. He took money, he wanted his share of everything, he left. But again, having money just will not develop the country. You must have people that have the brain, that have the understanding, the mindset, the determination, the willingness to use the money to change the country. Sadly for us in Liberia, we've not had those type of people. And this is why Samara Wolokoli can go to Spoon and be proud of what he has accomplished in less than 4 years. Samara and myself were trained by UNFPA, just so you know. He and I, we went to training together.
And George, you know, I heard you say that some time ago, but here he is now. Somebody might say he's a millionaire, and I was watching the interview. I was just shaking my head. I said, "Oh my goodness!" But George, this is what I want. I just listened to you saying that the UP lawmakers who have become a disappointment, you will not campaign for them, but you will campaign against them.
No, I can campaign for them, but provided if they will be willing for me to sell them based on their record. I'm willing to campaign. I'll tell the Liberian people that you elected this man for 9 years. He ate the $10,000. He voted for the Eton loan. He voted to remove Justice Johnny. If you like him, this is who he is. So that is what you expect when you elect him. On the basis of that, I will. But if you want me to go and say something different for you, I'm not doing it. That's my argument.
I get that. But George, here is the thing, though. What you just said, the lawmakers, they are a disappointment to the country. But some of them, Mr. Boakai, that you support, campaign for them. And the way you have taken a very strong stand against their incompetence and heartless lawmaking, You have also described them as legislators. We have now heard Mr. Boaka, for whom you've been trying to make the, you have been making the case aggressively. I've now heard him firmly on the lawmakers. Does it mean that he's, endorsing the poor performance here?
Mr. Sear, I think Ambassador Boaka is one of the most honest Liberian we can ever have, and he has been very clear. I agree with your choice of words. He has not been as forceful as I have been. We must understand one thing. Ambassador Boaka served in the legislature. When I say served, he was presiding over the Senate while he was there, so he knows some of these guys. But one thing again, Mr. Sear, I want us to understand. In Liberia, what we believe in is imperial presidency.
But could that be the reason why he's not forceful? Because he knew what they were doing, the games they were playing there?
I don't think so. He has been on the record. Like, for example, when the 30,000 was dished out, what Ambassador Boaka said, he was concerned how would people account for public funds. Ambassador Boaka argued that he didn't believe that money must be allotted to lawmakers because he said, how would they be able to account for it properly? But let's look at what he has said. Mr. C, to work in a system that for so long have been corrupt, for 20 plus years, without a zero proving allegations of corruption on you, that speaks to your character. What some of us are carrying Ambassador Boaka for is simple. We are judging him to say that if this man was in the system that is corrupt, but yet then he was not corrupt, then I trust him. Mr. C, listen, let me finish on this point. He has said one thing that I want you to hold him up. He has said, ending the culture of impunity, holding people accountable is going to be the fundamental pillars of his administration. And on the basis of that, I trust his judgment. I trust his passion.
And George, those are main words, but what we have not seen,
let's use what he has done in the past.
Give me some time to learn with my question here. So this is a budget that you have disapproved. Many Liberians have disapproved this budget. The budget is insensitive. First of all, the United Party, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe I miss it. The United Party has not given its position on this budget. That's two. One. Number two, Mr. Boaka is the current chairman of the CPP. The CPP has not spoken, has not given an official position on this budget that is not in the interest of the Liberian people. So we can cry about the CDC all we want. Does the opposition, present any opportunity for the Liberian people here, George?
I disagree with you. There have been press releases from the CPP. Let me go to the very first.
No, I'm talking about press releases concerning this budget, George.
Hold on now, Mr. C. Hold on. Right now, the budget is still a draft budget. And so what I will want to see is we anticipate there will be a position statement. Now,
George, you have been accusing the CDC. This budget has been around.
Yeah, but Mr. C, you have to understand, when we say we accuse the CDC, we cannot allocate resources to our government through a budget to do something, and we hear the Minister of Finance say we will be doing.
George, you know this is going to become the final product. We've seen it. George, you know.
No, wait, Mr. C. Again.
You know this guy is going to.
Yeah, but Mr. C.
Yes.
Mr. C.
Yes.
You have to understand, the CPP as a responsible opposition will not. Yes, they are. Let me say this: they will not jump on the draft budget submitted because you know what? I know the CDC guys. The guys can go back and say, you know what? Let it file out from stationery. And then they will come back and say, oh, the CPP lie on us. So, Mr. C, let's give for
George,
us.
That is a poor excuse.
It's not a, listen,
that
Mr. C,
a poor
Mr. C,
this is a major policy document for our country.
Let me say this to you. The CPP gave a statement. If you record, we spoke on the issue of the economy. Ambassador Boaka's first statement was made. That is when we got to know that the CDC government was withholding Liberian dollar security deposit. And the CPP frowned at such action and talk about the suffering of the Liberian people. Mr. C, George Lobbo is a talk show host. Yes, I support Ambassador Boaka. So when I discuss these issues, I discuss it from that perspective. The CPP, don't forget, it's a collaboration of 4 political parties. And
George, that is not an excuse.
They will make that statement. Give them the chance to make
What
a
chance
statement.
do you
It
want?
is, Mr. C.
But George, here's the thing.
We are
Here's
talk
the
show
thing. Hold on,
hosts.
George. Let me hold you there, George.
We are talk show hosts.
Let me
so
hold
we
you
can
there,
discuss
George.
the budget because we want to
Let me hold you there, George. We were here when Ayrton came. It was still in works when the CPP, to their credit, was on the government back. It passed anyway. Iboma came. The CPP were on the government back. It passed anyway. But it all became a fiasco. What I'm saying to you, you know, Josh, and you know this budget is going to pass at a 5G speed. And you're saying you don't want to rush? That's what I see,
Mr. C. The chairman, the current chairman of the CPP, Ambassador Joseph Newman Boaka, as a statesman, he has been very clear. He speaks and people listen. He will address the issues.
He will. Definitely. And he has
done it. He has done it. He will. So don't worry about it. His job, the CPP.
George, I'm not. It's not. I'm worried. I'm just disappointed.
Those are your choice of words.
Opposition up to now has not given a rebuttal to a major policy document.
We are going to. Don't worry, man. Come on. All right. They are going to.
This is why we're here. We are going to. We are looking into. We have
been
accusing the CDC of. And let me
throw this question at you. The CPP do not receive allotments in the budget. Let
me throw the question at you. You have articulated, and I agree with you, that budget performance report is cardinal in implementing every national budget. But how are you, the opposition, an example? I have not heard or received or read anywhere a financial report from the United Party, the ANC. The entire CPP has never given any financial report. What you don't raise money, you don't spend money?
Mr. C, again, let me say this to you. I think those financial obligation requirements by the National Elections Commission is something that every political party must fulfill its commitment to NEC. I think with the Freedom Information Act that was signed by the Unity Party.
Oh, this is the same music that CDC is saying. You ask for asset declaration to say use the Freedom Information Act. This is the same story.
Mr. C, again, Mr. C, I will not. You need to follow the right procedures. Those information should be available to you. Whatever that's stopping you from getting it, go there and obtain it. Don't play that
George, you are saying the same thing CDC saying, George. Are you listening to us?
There's a difference with CDC. CDC is placing a gag order stay on it, which it should not be. But when we ask for public information, we should have access to it. What the CDC have done is you ask for public information, they say, no, you can't see it. That is the difference. All we are saying, it is the law. When you ask for it, it should be made available to you. Go there and ascertain that information. Go there and obtain it. Go there and get it. The Unity Party government signed it into law. Mr. C have the right to go to the Ministry of Finance and ask for certain information that are public information. It should be made available to him. But the CDC government, when you ask, they go to the court, they use the court to manipulate it. That's not, you can't blame us for that, Mr. C, please. That's not our fault. The fact of the matter, we created a conducive environment so that information can be available to the public. And I think the Unity Party must be accredited for that. That shows that we wanted to promote transparency and enhance accountability. That is why we made sure that the Freedom Information Act was passed into law.
Thank you so very much, folks in cyberspace. You have been watching a special edition of the Hour of Politics with me, Anthony C., your host. My guest has been Mr. George Preston Lobbo, an executive of the Unity Party USA and Canada. He is the host of the Drive Informative Show that I happen to be an administrator of. But you know me, we have to do the Liberian people's job. This is not about friendship. This is about doing what is right for our people. The phone number to call is on the screen, folks. Do not call my personal number. Please, the number on the screen, the conference number is what we'll be using. Please, this is the only number you should call. That number on the screen is also in the scrolling text. Call that number, enter the call, and you will be given the opportunity to comment or ask Mr. Lobbo, my guest, a question. We will take a short break, and when we come back, we'll be reading your comments. Stay tuned and don't go anywhere. This is Focus on Liberia, where we educate and elevate and promote all things Liberia. We'll be right back.
At Focus on Liberia, we discuss everything Liberia, from education to politics, arts and culture, entertainment, agriculture, history, religion, family, and technology. Focus on Liberia uncovers and showcases the best of Liberia and shows the world the truth about Liberia. We educate, elevate, and promote all things Liberia. We conduct interviews, panel discussions, debates, and more. Tune in to Focus on Liberia on Facebook and YouTube and be a part of the stories that make up the news.
This is Focus on Liberia, and I am Dennis Jar.
And I am Anthony C.A. with my guest, Mr. George Preston Lobbo. George, why is Dennis, your big brother, putting his satin behind you all the time, man?
I mean, you got to understand, Mr. C. I'm Josh. First, I'm from the Kisi tribe. The first boy child is Sa. So
Okay.
that's it. Sa.
Okay. All right, let's read some comments. And folks, like I told you, the number to call is in the scrolling text. It's the number that starts with 605-313-6004 and enter the code 791-403#. That is the only number you should call if you want to participate. Let's read some comments here. Let's hear from Randall Thomas. Mr. GMB said he will audit the CDC government. So why the CDC government refused to audit the Unity Party government? Let's hear from Herring or Siebo. What happened to the so-called Green Revolution money in the 80s? Somebody is going into history here. Let's hear from Morris Gion. Looking at the Ministry of State allotment on stationery is more than 500% increment. You see, this is somebody that knows math more than I do. Sam Waller writes, why is Josh on this show today if he is not here to lay out a clear alternative solution? Josh is doing what we call him for. Let's hear from Wanya. The current budget is the most good one in the
Mama, the people would like to hear. They would like to hear Ambassador Boaka's vision and his policies. Maybe next time.
Yeah, let's hear from Prince here. Prince writes, Mr. Sierra, please remind Lobbo that this current proposed budget is a replica of the off budget of 2016, and JMD was the president of the Senate and helped pass that budget.
That's a lie.
Has no moral grounds to speak against this budget, let alone legitimate voice speak. Liberian voted for change in 2017. They will vote for change again in 2023. GMB is not change but chance, he writes. A lot of comments here. Let me get to as many as we can. Let's hear from Bobby or Bray. Solar panel, well, plumbing, roads, street lights, access to hot water, soap, infrastructure, the smaller things. Wait a minute, smarter. All right, maybe small things run, the faster they get done. Yeah. Folks, when you're writing your comment, take your time, man. You know, we appreciate you being here. We want to read your comments. Take your time to write them. Well, you're from Bwaka or Sale. Good evening, FOL. I'm watching you from Ukraine, Kyiv. Oh, wow. The government, through the Minister of Finance, have raised the budget for merely their officials in order to run campaign within 2023. So this is just a trial. If it works, next budget will be more than this. Also, for some of them who are performing product like State Pro Tem Abachi, Speaker Chamber, and so many other within the CDC government. That person is making a case there. Let's hear from Sam Water again. It's always busy. So then say where you are going to get the money from to sustain and increase the budget without loans to run the country effectively. Criticizing is not enough. That person is going after
he's asking me.
Yeah. Let's hear from this Facebook user. Are you now an agricultural economist, Mr. Lobbo? For your information, Liberia is not a communist country. Therefore, the government cannot be in the business of making farms. That person, right. Let's hear from O'Neill. O'Neill is speaking to somebody else. He said, Wilson, you sound like you visit your plumber for teeth cleaning and not the dentist, because coming is a criminal that happened when he was on the board of directors at Chevron. Somebody is throwing a punch at coming, like yeah, from Thomas, right? If they educate the people, the minds will become liberated. That's why they keep the people uneducated and poor. Let's hear from Florence Boca. She writes, man, don't waste your time on those people who are enjoying suffering because of their own foolish actions and they are very low-minded. Let's hear from William Dumba, right? It's time to start installing poles on South Beach or everybody in Liberia will perish. This government has gone above and beyond. High treason and rampant corruption. Who do these fools think the Liberian people are? People
You
are
know,
getting...
listen, Mr. C, this is just saying whatever was done 1980 after the coup,
right?
Because those are the charges those 17 men were killed on the pole for.
Yeah,
rampant corruption.
All right, George, please quickly return to the comments, and then we will go to...
a few things I want to say. The issue of asking if I'm an agriculture economist. Folks, we need to get rid of that. In this 21st century where practical economics calls for common sense and being pragmatic, meaning allowing what works work. What I'm saying is I'm not saying Liberia should be a communist country. When I speak in terms of the government having the ability to invest in opening farms, it's a pity you don't know that the government is responsible to create the private sector. If the Liberian government made available $20 million today and say, if you are a Liberian, you want to invest in agriculture to open farms, we'll make the loan available to you with 0% interest, then who is creating that farm? Isn't that the government? I mean, some of you people, the way you think, we don't think like you folks. Again, we've always said the government is responsible for creating an enabling environment. That enabling environment meaning government through policy. If you understand what fiscal policy is, which is government spending and taxation that influence the economy, government must be able to invest in creating that private sector. We can't be borrowing money at 25%. This is why you don't have Liberian businesses, because they are struggling. You heard the Minister of Finance say there have been very little done to open up the fiscal space. What he's talking about in terms of the space for government to really spend or put money aside for people to borrow. So again, folks, when we speak to these issues, it's just that some of us, we're thinking ahead of you. You know, some of you, I know you don't understand what we're saying, but again, that's what it's all about. On the issue of someone asking that JMB, the budget the guys just passed is a replica of the UP budget, then I will tell you, my young man, my dear brother, I will ask that you read, because the last time I checked, Mr. C, do you recall the IMF having a press release doing an audit on the UP government and saying the UP government must set a realistic budget? Can you recall that?
No.
Do you recall the IMF and the World Bank reversing growth rate for the UP government?
No, apparently you guys were good at being friends with those international partners.
Come on, man, don't play that yet. So again, I would say this, Mr. C. When people
Ellen was the darling of the West at the time.
Mr. C. When people come out,
she spoke their language.
That wasn't for that reason, Mr. C. Okay. Ellen had. You have to understand. We qualify out of the HIPIC initiative, leaving Cameroon, Sierra Leone, other African countries there. We had to institute economic reforms. We had to. And that is why we established those anti-graft institutions, so that we demonstrated to the world that we're serious for business. And that is what the UP government did. And again, my dear brother who said that the budget is a replica of the Unity Party budget, that is a lie, because the Unity Party budget never exceeded $600 million. There were times it were adjusted. Even with that, the Unity Party had the ability to generate revenue. We did not borrow money to say we made up our budget. What we got was our negotiation with international partners for external support in some areas, and it did not even contribute more than 25% of our national budget. We had a core revenue of over $420 million. So I ask that you take some time.
But George, you did not give us a working agricultural sector. You did not give us a working education.
No, that's not.
You did not give us a working health.
I disagree with you, because you know what? Let's be honest here. Go to Cary and see the level of investment that was made at Cary. Do you know what Cary is?
All right.
Center for Research, especially in agriculture in Swakopmund. Mr. C, when CDC came to power, right, they were testing seeds No,
Yeah.
let me finish now.
No, George, you answered my question. You said that is not the case. Let bring in the
so
call.
we
Some of
did
them
that.
might have
Okay.
similar questions. Let's
If
give
you
them
have
time.
question, I
So
will,
let me give
but-
you a minute to conclude quickly, please.
Yes, so that's what I want to say. I just want to say on the issue of JMB, like the caller said, we need to understand who JMB is. JMB is not seeking a chance. What JMB is trying to do is an opportunity to create an environment that we all can inherit when he's
All
gone.
right. Thank you.
He can
Let's bring in
definitely
the
do that
callers.
based on his character. Oh, we got caller now?
Yeah, we got callers. We got callers. Not caller, but callers. Kesali Double, let hear you. Long time.
Kesali Double. It's been a long time.
I'm here, man. I'm following. I'm always following you. It's just that I'm not calling all the time. That's all.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, and thanks to Lobbo. I'm really not calling to talk on the topic. What I'm calling is that to give a flower to FOL for the level of improvement and the level of neutrality so far in the discussion. If I was to be grading any talk show on when it comes to discussing the broad issue, I think I would rate FOL high, very high above all.
That's good.
So I just hope that you guys keep up a good job. And George Lobbo, I want to say thanks for the discussion too. You know, the reason why I'm grading FOL is that you show your neutrality. I'm not talking about the life of George Lobbo, the life of Heron Costa, and some guys who are taking sides. For them, they have their side already. They tell you that, hey, I'm for this person, and they go for it. And I respect them for that. But if you come to a talk show and pretend to be neutral, like the life of Sekou Kene and his boy or C, who will discuss somebody, but then they pretend to be neutral, you know I have a problem with that. But FOL, you showing your level of neutrality, except for one person on the show who really hurt my ears. You know, that is Jerome, but FOL is a class. And to you, see it, I mean, you improve a whole lot, brother. Keep it up, and I want to tell you thank you very much. I'll follow your discussion almost on every show you've gone on, and your level of neutrality is just exceptional. Thank you, and thanks to the FOF family. I hope you guys keep it up.
Thank you. Thank you. I will continue to improve and work harder to become one of Liberia's best, presenter or media person. Thank you for your comment. We appreciate that. Let's bring in Mr. George Toto. Mr. Toto, Chairman Toto, it's good to have you.
Yeah, man.
Thank you. Thank you, Anthony.
Yeah.
Well, so that quarter, your man Anthony can hit all the CDC too much. But Anthony, thank you very much. This is a very good discussion, and also my name, brother George. I said that on his show the last time. You know, George, for me today, I think you are not really making a good case for the Unity Party government or the economic government, as they call it. Like I told you the last time some time ago, you play a pivotal role on the Unity Party government. That's it with the party that not the government. So when you come in also try to speak also about the issue, you always want to give a backdrop, like just a talk show, your president, you don't have to reflect this. But we know who George Lobbo is when it comes to the Unity Party or the Unity Party organization. And when it comes to the budget also too, for George, I bet if that budget is passed, if you take a statistic in the Senate or in the House, most of the people that will go to see what that budget will be Unity Party people. And as a major political party, none of the political institutions speak on all this budget. Everybody's quiet. And the budget will be passed, then you see the majority around causing door. I was not part of it. I was not part of it.
And Mr. Toto, I'm not taking your time. George, no, that's why I was pressing on. And I wanted George to be clear to me that slow. People are answering that is true. We have not spoken on it, and that is a failure. I wanted him to acknowledge that, but he said we're going to. Go ahead.
Yeah, evidence is
because, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm not on the ground. I don't know what the party is.
I don't know the guys in the Senate, the House will make a comment. That budget will pass right before our eyes. Then they will kind of make a progress using the Liberian people. Or not part of it. So this is the time that at least the opposition is supposed to come out to make a to make a supporting statement about the budget and to call their people in the Liberia or in the group chamber.
Okay.
Not to support or not to support.
I agree with you on that.
That's what I've been saying about that. That's the point I wanted to make.
Thank you, Mr.
I mean,
Tutu.
that's a brilliant point. I mean, again, Mr. C,
Yeah.
the party will take its position. I don't know what the position will be. I can't speak to what has not been done. I won't do that. But again, Mr. Chairman, you're right. The party should take a position. I definitely agree with you. The party should call that out.
Yeah. All right. Let's bring in this caller from Toronto. Phone number ending in 3219. Your name and where you joining? I mean, your name, please.
Yes, Anthony, this is your favorite friend. My name is Benjamin Kofafani.
Oh, the presidential hopeful, Benjamin Kofafani. Let hear you.
Okay, first thing first. You see, when I listen to your guest, I will be honest with you. I'm not only frustrated. He's exhibiting the flaws that have marked budgeting in Liberia.
Raise your voice a little bit, Mr.
Yeah, I
Kofa.
want to hear him because
Mr. Fania.
He said, "What's his name, Fania?"
He's exhibiting.
Ben Finn.
He's exhibiting the flaws that have marked budgeting in Liberia. Let me tell you one thing. I don't think he understands the purpose of a budget. But let me let him know. The purpose of a budget, number one, the most important purpose is to encourage and enhance economic activity within the country. That is the purpose. That's the number one purpose of a budget. Now, let me go back to history. He's talking about Unity Party that took something from 85 million to almost 600 million. The most important criteria of a budget, maybe he doesn't know, the most important criteria is what they call revenue generation. That is how much money the government is able to raise. Let me tell you what is important. It is important because citizens will be at work. The most important element that you make money from when it comes to budgeting is what they call income taxes, personal income taxes. This man you are hosting today, Unity Party ran Liberia for 12 years. And literally, they created no job. The budgeting that this man is talking about, it is mostly donor funded. The budgeting in Liberia represents failure. It's a total failure. The government is not working because there's not enough economic activity. And this man is talking about budgeting. I don't think he understands the basis of budgeting.
Thank you, Mr. Fania.
No. Let me just make my last point.
Yeah, please. We have a lot of callers.
Danny, I want him to appear. If you can, let him appear so we can have this conversation.
See, they ran a government.
Danny, I want him to appear. Let's have this conversation.
They created no jobs. They created no jobs.
Since I don't know, I'll tell you what he don't know.
To criticize the CDC budget. The CDC's budget is wrong. It's a mess. It will be passed. But the budgeting in Liberia is just an example of how the state has failed.
Ben.
It represents failure.
Ben.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Josh, we want to have a dialogue with you.
That's a conversation. Yeah.
Are you willing?
I am 200% willing with.
Okay. I will work out the details. I will work out the details with you and George after the show. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Do you want me to respond to him now? I want to respond to him quick, please.
George, time is catching up. Let me take the last caller quickly.
Okay, I want to respond to him. Go ahead.
Yeah. Our last caller for the day, phone number ending in 6494. Let's hear you. Your name.
Yeah, hi. My name is T. I'm calling from New Jersey.
Okay.
How you doing? Yeah.
What's her name? T?
T. Yeah, T.
T, okay. The only lady.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, say the only lady.
I agree with the last caller that just called, right? And one or two points I wanted to make, and also to ask a question. Lobbo make a statement saying that something about agriculture, and then another thing he said, we don't know GNB. Like he can do certain things. And the budget the man talking about, all the opposition are there, that budget gonna pass. So nothing gonna happen. The other day on TV, the assistant minister was on it. When that man was talking, what he said, someone who been in the country for so long, we got family back on the tears. in my eyes, I was like, damn, that's how these people treating their own people? There's really nothing in there for the common person. Okay? How can you be a assistant or finance minister and you building all your mansions and you got all the businesses and that conflict of interest, but yet instead of opposition will say that these people will pass their bill? If so much boycott and comments want to do something and make a change, they should start attacking the people for their bills that come into pass. Because there's nothing in there for the Liberian people. And all over you keep saying we don't know on boycott. When will we get to know him? Boycott needs to come up and talk more. He needs to say more what he will do. Not every time you come up to throw one thing out there, this other thing. It's not connected.
Thank you,
because
Titi.
the other caller just said you were there for 12 years. You didn't do nothing. So why did you pull your back?
Thank you, Titi.
You know, that's what needs change.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. George, before you respond, let me read a comment from Clarence Tour. He said, Ben is wrong on what budget actually is.
We'll have that. Ben will come back. We'll have that discussion.
We'll have that discussion.
Don't discuss that. We'll have that discussion.
So there, let me hear you, Josh.
So let me respond to T. I want to thank her for calling. Let me say this, Mr. C. I understand we are in a political context, and I expect our other friends from the other side to always have this position about the Unity Party. But the very first thing, Mr. C, I think one of the fundamental problems in Liberia is the level of dishonesty from those who claim to know. Any Liberian who's rational, who says that the Unity Party was in power for 12 years, didn't do nothing, that itself, I just don't have to go back and forth. That tells me you first have to come to terms with the reality, and then before you can begin to talk about what was done. You can say that everything was not done perfectly, but for you to state that nothing was done, that just tells me that you're not only dishonest, it's maybe out of desperation. Because, Mr. C, when a government that takes a country that was in a graveyard and woke it up like Jesus woke up Lazarus, and will take the budget from $80 million to $500+ million, and you say they didn't do nothing, that tells me you're not real. I understand. Thank God Mayor Cody said there are 17 continents. You might be on one of those continents. When a government take over a country like Liberia that inherited $4.9 billion in debt and could not borrow and have bad credit, but that government will put itself through strenuous measure to ensure we secure a debt waiver and begin to develop the country, and will pay 650 kilometers worth of road and will open up major economic corridors, and you say they didn't do nothing, then we'll not get into that. Let's go fast forward. When a government take over a country where the national poverty rate is at 68.0%, but will leave power and reduce it to 50.0%, and you say they do nothing, then I will leave you with your own conscience. So the first thing I will say is, I want these folks to first reconcile their thought. Then we can get to discuss the facts on the UP government. But let me come to the presidential aspirant. I understand you want to be, you might be aspiring to run for president, and I will be grateful since you have accepted the offer for us to have this dialogue. I will not refer to it as a debate. It won't be a debate. I wanted to respond to you, but I guess since we'll be having a conversation, I will just leave it like that and wait until you come here. But I want you to do yourself a favor. When you are coming to the discourse, next time, don't come here and say the Unity Party budget was all donor support. Because I will say to you, my dear presidential hopeful, that itself is deceptive, it's a lie. Less than 30% of the Unity Party budget was funded by foreign aid. So if you would sit as someone who wants to be president, will start making and will start giving false information at this early age, then we'll not go forward. But let me say something. He talked about the budget should be based on revenue. Mr. C, how you think people say during the UP time there were jobs in Liberia? How you say we signed concession agreements? We attracted over $16.5 billion in foreign direct investment. So those investments we attracted, the China Union, the Golden Veron. So what were they paying? And you want to tell me about revenue? But come back, let's have that conversation. For the sake of time, I will look forward to the discussion between he and myself, so I will not get into it. But I will say this, Mr. C, the Unity Party government would not have taken a budget from $80 million to $520 million, depending on aid. That is a blatant lie, and I challenge him to prove me wrong on it. And so I will wait for that discussion between him and myself. On the next point of Chairman Tutu's statement, the chairman needs to understand one thing, and people need to get this straight up. Yes, indeed, I'm an executive of the party. I'm an elected official member of the Unity Party USA Canada, which I also enjoy the privileges as a Unity Party executive when I go back home. But again, we must understand because I'm George Lobbo and I come from the party, I will always have a position. My position does not supersede the institution position. If I want my position to be the final position, the definitive position, then I should leave the institution. Then you can say whatever decision I make is my own decision. At the end of the day, my views are my views. My position is my position. The institution position will always supersede my position. Whether I agree or disagree, it is up to me. I can express my frustration about it, but the institution will always remain supreme as long as I'm part of the institution. Is it true, Mr. Toto, and what you and Anthony said? I agree with you guys. The party should take a position. The CPP, our Standard Bearer Ambassador Bwaka, who is the leader of the CPP, there's a need for there to be an address on this issue. There's a need for us to hold our lawmakers accountable. But I think it would be wrong for people to just say, oh, because George will come from this. Listen, on the issue of the Unity Party, there are people, there's nothing we do. People, minds are made up. But the discussion must be based and centered on the facts. So again, to Ben Fania, the presidential hopeful, I want to say I'm honored and I'm glad that you accepted the discussion. Let it be a dialogue so two of us can have this discussion, Mr. C. Even if I'm not available, let me know. I will adjust my schedule to make sure that I can be here for us to have this discussion on one of these special editions. On the basis of that, to teach, talk about people not hearing from Ambassador Bwaka. Your understanding and hearing from Ambassador Bwaka as a man who's running every day from one place to another, being on the radio and yelling. He don't need to do that. The Liberian people know who Ambassador Bwaka is. He has served his country 25 plus years. Again, let me say this.
And that's the same. That's the thing she said. That you are. No, I'm just trying to throw in there, George. I will give you time. You the guy. You were talking, man. She is saying that is why you continue to say the Liberian people know Bwaka. The Liberian people know Bwaka, and she's saying to you that is not enough.
Yeah, but Mr. C, let me finish with this. The thing about it, to people who support other candidates, it is not enough. We understand that, because you know what? For them to see their candidates driving around Monrovia.
What do you think is enough, George?
Mr. C, let me say this to you. Mr. C, we in the Unity Party and supporters of Ambassador Bwaka, I will say this to you. You don't serve in a community for 20 plus years and someone will say that the people in the community don't know you. That's not true. Liberian Ambassador Bwaka was LPRC Managing Director. He was LPMC Managing Director for 9. He worked to LPMC for 9 years. He was Minister of Agriculture. He was Vice President for 12 years. He got to travel the entire country. Again, Ambassador Bwaka might not be on the radio every day like Mr. Cummings, might not be on the radio every day like Mr. Kasser. But again, Mr. C, you need to understand something in politics. George, I was involved. No, let me finish my point.
Yeah, inject this. I will give you time. You know I gave you time.
Yeah, but let me finish my thought.
Yeah, inject this, George, so you can learn with it, right? Knowing Mr. Bwaka for who he has been based on his service to his country is another way of knowing him. I agree. Can we also know Mr. Bwaka for his plans?
Absolutely, and I agree with you on that. And that is why he has been very forceful. We listen, Mr. C. Ambassador Bwaka, based on his scheduling, he has made himself available. In America here, he had interview with Spoon. He had an interview. Is it Volcano? What the guy called? He had an interview.
Shut down while they
okay. Yeah. He had an interview. So again, what we are saying is that based on his
not come on focus on Liberia.
Mr. C, I agree with you.
Are you guys afraid of me?
Nah, Mr. C.
I know you are not afraid of me. You always want to engage me.
Mr. C, you know that. Let me say this to you. And I continue to work behind the scene tirelessly, making sure that can happen. And I will say this again to you. I strongly believe that if Ambassador Bwaka will be president, he will be president for all Liberians. I don't want him to be the president who will say he can't go to this platform, that platform. As far as I'm concerned, we just have to work on with his scheduling, and then we can make that happen. But again, to my sister T, let me say this to you. If you say Ambassador Bwaka have not spoken about what he wants to do, I think that is unfair. Here in the United States, Ambassador Bwaka was here recently, Mr. C, where in Philadelphia, he stood up in the midst of many Liberians and articulated a clear vision for the country. For over 2 hours, 30 minutes, he took questions where he discussed his vision and his plans. He then went to Minnesota and did the same old thing. I think we need to listen to what he has said, and will continue to make the case for Ambassador Bwaka. He will continue to make the case for himself. Mr. C, in business, there's something called first mover advantage. When Lone Star came to Liberia, Lone Star enjoyed first mover advantage. That is why we bought SIM card for $65. When Selcon came,
are you saying that's why Mr. Walker is enjoying?
He's enjoying it. That is why Mr. Cummings has to travel every day, because you know what? Ambassador Walker, when he was paying his 25 years quota to his country in Liberia, traveling and working for his country, Mr. Cummings was outside. So Mr. Cummings now is trying to play catch up. And that is why
what we know about Lone Star that enjoyed the first mover advantage is that Lone Star was selling to Liberians $65 for SIM card. Some people think that they rob us.
Mr. C, I wrote one thing about me. I'm very clear. I wrote the other day on Facebook. In the absence of competition, consumers have no choice. They have to go with what is available to them. You can say
that there's no competition yet, so we have
at that time there was no competition when Lone Star came. That is why I refer to it as first mover advantage. When Lone Star came to Liberia, Lone Star had no competition. Even though Labor Cell will follow, Commune will follow, but Lone Star was the first cell phone company. So again,
my reading of that comment is that you guys are complacent. You think this is a done deal.
Those are your words. We are not. I'm here making a case again. And how can we be complacent when we are out there making a case every day? How can we be complacent when Ambassador Walker will travel across the globe and will come to America to make the case? We are not complacent. But let me say this to you: for you people, you believe that we need to be in cast them, Mr. Cummings. We don't have to. We don't.
George, that is not what I'm saying. For me. You understand?
You just want him to come to FOL. We will make that happen.
As the guy asking the questions, I want to see a competition. I want to see people.
We are open to that.
I want to see plans being rolled out.
Stage.
As we speak, you people still working on your website. You people still working on DMV. It has not come. It's one promise after the other, but we have to leave it there.
Mr. People have heard what we said. We've summed up our economic agenda into 4-letter words: ARTS.
And where's the ARTS? Where can I go to read?
Agriculture, roads, tourism, and sanitation.
It's coming from your mouth.
Where do I go to read it? How it's going to grow the economy and create jobs.
Where do I go to read it, Josh?
Mr. Say, you want me to send you a dossier with regards to that? I will send you something.
The proposed agenda, the CDC document, you have it read there by you. Sure,
because it was adopted.
You have it read there. Can you do the same thing with your candidate's plan? That this is Mr. Walker's plan.
Mr. Say, we'll give you a plan. We cannot run for president for election.
You continue to use will, Josh?
Mr. Say, we are in 2021. Don't forget, we are going to reveal a comprehensive agenda for transforming Liberia. Ambassador Walker is ready. He's one thing I will say this to you. We are prepared on day one. He has made it clear. He has been the only one who has also laid out his first 100-day plan. In his first 100 days, he intends to audit the government. He will be replacing. In his first 100 days, he intends to make sure that no car gets stuck in the mud. So we there already, Mr. C. You want us to go ahead?
You both have 12-year cars at stake in the mud.
Mr. C, in 12 years, we must not forget Liberia had 140 plus years.
Okay.
Yes, but there were roads not paved. They had to
Mr.
take the 12 years government to pave 650 kilometers.
Thank you,
Mr.
the
country
Lobbo.
we inherited Liberia in the worst state ever.
Liberia
was referred to as a failed state. And I think this is why when our friends who are desperate against the Unity Party ignore that fact, ignore the transformation we made, and said nothing was done, that is dishonesty to the country. And on the basis of that, I want them to reconcile in their minds that there was progress made by the Unity government.
Mr. Lobbo, time is our enemy. You know, we always happy to have you because when we do, we have an engaging, enlightening discussion here. It's not one of those what they call Jerry Sprinkle show, where people really insult at their fellow citizens just because of political disagreement. We don't entertain that nonsense. We want to be the best for our country, Liberia. There's a comment here I have to read.
Okay.
Clarence 12, I'm on second last year. You have improved exceptionally. The way you ask questions is getting very astute. A lot of the journalists in Liberia can learn from the way you structure your questions. I know Clarence 12, he is a GM brother to a godfather of mine. The reason I decided to read this, I don't like praises, right, Josh? But the reason I'm reading is I want to be able to do better. And I depend on the audience to tell me that. But what I need more of is criticism. Criticize me what I'm not doing right so that Liberia can get the best. And that is the reason I'm pushing these politicians. We want the best for our country. And that is my only goal. Not because I'm against your candidate. My man, I want you to produce the best product.
You know we can handle it.
You remember the last time? What's the guy named Aliu Kamara?
Yeah.
He said the reason I have decided to support GMB is because of the Ansonisia guy. The way the guy can go after the old man. So I've done something for the Unity Party.
Because you have
the guy can articulate. The guy can articulate. So that is an added value, and that is why the reason I do it. George Lobbo, again, as always, here we want to say thank you for coming. Because of time, we'll take 2 minutes of closing statement from you.
Mr. Sear, before I begin, let me take this time to recognize the birthday of my senior brother Thomas Awaji in Atlanta, Georgia. Today is his birthday. But let me also take this time to say to those who call, thank you. For those of you who agree and disagree, those of you who offer criticisms of me as well, I think it is necessary because there's always room for improvement. And again, I will say this. We are in a political context. I do not expect everybody to support us. I do not expect everybody to be happy with our performances. However, Ambassador Joseph Numa Boakai is the candidate that I believe in. And the reason is very simple. If Liberia must move forward, Liberia will go somewhere. We're going to need a president who has been tested, one who has worked across the aisle, someone who has demonstrated at all levels that he can be trusted with public funds and nothing will be done. This is a man for 25 years with zero proven corruption allegation on him. His history speaks for itself. And all he has asked you people for is an opportunity to serve and give back to his country. Having said that, Ambassador Boakai is committed to ensuring that we can improve the living standard of our people. Lord, Mr. C, I continue to say this. This is an opportunity we can make. To the CDC government, I understand what is happening. President, I do not expect much from you because you know what? I can't ask you to give what you don't have. You should never have been elected president. This was a burden put upon you by few people, and I completely understand what you're going through. You are going through a lot, but those around you that we expected to be helping you in making you do better, they themselves are not helping you. They've used you for their self-benefit. Mr. you will bear the full responsibility when your days are over. President Taylor is sitting today in The Hague. I'm pretty sure he wish he could have done a lot of things differently. The Blaise Compaoré is now on trial in Burkina Faso. He wish he would have done things differently. Again, I will say this to you, George. You do have some time. What you need to do is to call the Minister of Finance and say, I've looked at this budget. I just look at the stationery you're allotted to the Ministry of State. This can be real. This is unrealistic. This is not fair to our people. When you have Phoebe Hospital, JFK, people hauling water in bucket. President, you've not only let the Liberian people down, but you are a complete disappointment to those soccer players, some who were aspiring to run to lead their country. Your example have demonstrated to the world that your skills were in your foot and your brain was in your foot as well. And having said this, Mr. C, I want to say thank you very much. I look forward to the engagement with Bear, the presidential hopeful. Hopefully, we can now dissect and discuss the Unity Party budget since he will be looking. That's why I didn't respond to you like I intended to. And I will be looking forward for us to discuss the revenue stream and things we did to move Liberia from where we took it from. On this note, Mr. C, I want to thank the Focus on Liberia family for you to make yourself available here to me on this special edition of the Hour of Politics. Thanks to our viewers. Once again, Mr. C, I'm humble to be here. But Liberians, JMB is the way forward. Join us, join our team.
The name for them is politician. They have sweet mouths. One guy called, let me not call his name, but he used the word cajolery. That was my first time hearing that word. What? Then I remember the word cajole.
Am I a politician now?
Well, I'm talking to politicians in general.
But I'm not one.
So. The one who goes all out to market a politician. If he's not a politician, then I don't know. Because the product he's marketing is just a political product.
He's a salesman.
So this salesman is a political salesman, even though
he's a businessman. He's selling anybody selling with a market.
They want power. And power only the one. Before they know when they get it, they will have the leverage to do what they want. What they do for Liberia, or what they do for themselves, as they have always done. That's the reason the Liberian people will always be the judge. But what I know, is they will always come and ask for power, and they will come to ask for power from you, and you will always give them that power, and they will always cheat you, and they will always continue to come back. The question is, when are you going to get it right, fellow Liberians? We have bad choices. We have Mr. Boaka, we have Mr. Cummings. They are giving excuses while they have not even rolled out their plan yet. They say they still have time. Seriously, time? That is the enemy of man. That is the problem most Black people have. We play with time so much, we don't plan ahead of time. And when we get caught with time, we give excuses, and our excuses will punish our future. Education is in shambles. We don't have the time. George was right when he said, look, let us train the young people and give them skills. Because sitting in classroom from ABC to 12th grade, we don't have that time right now. They are 18, they are 20, they are 25. Some of them are 30. Can we put more money in vocational education, make them carpenters, and any other thing that can use their hands to become productive citizens? But will you see that in their plan? They don't even come up with the plan yet. And that is my frustration. The Liberia that we want, we can't get it based on excuses. George Preston Lobbo, it's always good to have you, GM brother, as you will love me to call you. This is how we'll come to the firing edition of the Hour of Politics with me, Anthony C. Until we catch you next time. The song says we are all Liberians, irrespective of how we see it. Thank you, and bye-bye, folks.
We are Liberians. Liberia is our